The Echo Beyond the Stars. Part 1. The Discovery. The research vessel Odyssey hung motionless in the void, a silver needle suspended in an ocean of stars that had no shore. Dr. Elena Vasquez pressed her palm against the viewport, feeling the cold radiating from the reinforced glass as she watched distant galaxies spiral in their eternal dance. 3 months into their deep space mission, the crew had grown accustomed to the silence, the kind of silence that pressed against your eardrums and made you question whether sound had ever truly existed. "Commander, you need to see this." The voice belonged to Ensign David Park, their communications specialist, though the words carried a tremor that Elena had never heard before. She turned from the viewport, her movements slow in the artificial gravity, and made her way to the bridge where Park sat hunched over his console like a man praying over a forbidden text. The bridge of the Odyssey was designed to be a place of scientific discovery, all clean lines and humming instruments, but now it felt like a tomb. The overhead lights seemed dimmer than usual, casting long shadows that danced with the ship's subtle movements. Dr. Marcus Chen, their xenobiologist, was already there, his usually composed face showing signs of strain. Dr. Sarah Kellerman, their psychologist, stood nearby with her tablet clutched against her chest like a shield. "What is it, Park?" Elena asked, settling into her command chair. The leather felt cold against her back and she suppressed a shiver. "I've been monitoring the deep space frequencies like you ordered," Park said, his fingers dancing across his keyboard with nervous energy. "Standard procedure, looking for any anomalies in the cosmic background radiation. But this isn't standard." He gestured to his main screen, where a series of mathematical sequences scrolled past in hypnotic patterns. At first glance, it looked like random noise, the kind of cosmic static that filled the universe like white noise from the Big Bang. But as Elena watched, she began to see the pattern underlying the chaos. "Those are prime numbers," Marcus breathed, leaning closer to the screen. His reflection stared back at him, distorted by the monitor's curvature. "But that's impossible. Natural cosmic phenomena don't produce prime number sequences." Elena felt a cold knot forming in her stomach. Where is it coming from? "That's the problem," Park said, his voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "The signal originates from Kepler 442, but that system went supernova approximately 2.3 million years ago. There shouldn't be anything there to transmit." The silence that followed was deeper than the vacuum of space outside their hull. Sarah stepped forward, her professional curiosity overriding her personal unease. Could it be a reflection, some kind of echo bouncing off a stellar object? "That's what I thought initially," Park replied, pulling up another screen filled with wave forms and frequency analyses. "But the signal isn't degrading like a reflection would. It's maintaining its coherence across millions of light years. More than that, it's getting stronger." Elena's mind raced through the possibilities, each more unlikely than the last. A civilization that had survived a supernova, a beacon left by an extinct race, or something else entirely, something that defied their understanding of physics and time. "How long has this been going on?" she asked. "I detected it approximately 6 hours ago," Park said. "But the signal itself, Commander, it's been transmitting continuously for what appears to be billions of years. The mathematical patterns are so complex they make our most advanced encryption look like children's puzzles." Dr. Yuki Tanaka, their theoretical physicist, entered the bridge with her characteristic quiet intensity. Her black hair was pulled back in its usual tight bun, but Elena noticed strands escaping, as if even Yuki's legendary composure was beginning to crack. "I heard there was an anomaly," she said, her Japanese accent barely perceptible after years of working in international space programs. "More than an anomaly," Elena said, gesturing for Park to explain. As he did, Yuki's expression shifted from professional interest to something approaching awe or terror. "If this is genuine," Yuki said slowly, "we're looking at evidence of a civilization that either survived a supernova or existed before it. but the timeline doesn't make sense. Kepler 442 was a main sequence star when we last observed it. It shouldn't have gone supernova for another billion years. Unless it didn't go supernova naturally, Marcus suggested. The implications hung in the air like a poisonous gas. Captain James Morrison, their military liaison, chose that moment to enter the bridge. His weathered face, carved by decades of service, showed immediate concern at the atmosphere. "What's the situation, Commander?" Alina quickly briefed him, watching as his jaw tightened with each new piece of information. Morrison was a practical man, grounded in the tangible realities of space travel and human psychology. This kind of cosmic mystery was outside his wheelhouse, but Alina valued his perspective on the human element. "This could be a trap," Morrison said immediately. "Some kind of lure designed to draw us in. We've seen enough human conflicts to know that seemingly innocent signals can hide dangers." "Or it could be the greatest discovery in human history," Marcus countered. "Proof that we're not alone, that civilizations can survive cosmic disasters. Think of what we could learn." Sarah stepped forward, her psychologist's instincts kicking in. "The psychological impact of either scenario needs to be considered. If this is genuine first contact, the crew will need support. If it's a trap—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. Alina looked at each member of her team, seeing the mixture of excitement and fear in their eyes. They were scientists and explorers, trained to seek knowledge in the darkest corners of the universe. But they were also human, with all the hopes and fears that entailed. "We're going to investigate," she decided, her voice carrying the authority that had gotten her this command. "But we're going to be careful. Morrison, I want continuous threat assessments. Yuki, I need you to analyze every aspect of this signal. Marcus, prepare protocols for potential first contact scenarios. Sarah, monitor the crew's psychological state. We're going to approach this like the professionals we are." As the crew dispersed to their stations, Alina remained in her chair, staring at the mathematical sequences that seemed to pulse with an inner light. Somewhere in those patterns lay answers to questions humanity had been asking since they first looked up at the stars. The question was whether they were prepared for the answers they might find. The Odyssey came alive around her as systems were brought to full readiness. The hum of the engines, the whisper of air recyclers, the distant thrum of the fusion core, all the sounds that made up the ship's mechanical symphony. But beneath it all, Alina thought she could hear something else, a rhythm that matched the signal's impossible pattern, as if the universe itself was breathing in time with their discovery. She shook her head, dismissing the thought as stress-induced imagination. But as she gave the order to set course for the coordinates of the dead star, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were about to open a door that had been closed for very good reasons. The stars outside the viewport began to shift as the Odyssey oriented itself toward its destination. In the distance, where no star should shine, something was calling to them across the gulf of space and time. The signal continued its endless transmission, each pulse a heartbeat from something that should have died millions of years ago. Alina Vasquez, commander of humanity's most advanced research vessel, settled back in her chair and tried to quiet the voice in her head that whispered of ancient evils and cosmic horrors. She was a scientist, rational and grounded in observable reality. But as the ship began its journey into the unknown, she couldn't help but wonder if some realities were too terrible to observe. The mathematical sequences continued their dance across Park's screen, each number a note in a song that had been playing since before humanity existed. And somewhere in the darkness between the stars, something was listening to their approach. Part 2: The Approach. 3 weeks into their journey, the Odyssey had become a different ship. The excitement of discovery had given way to a pervasive unease that infected every corner of the vessel. Dr. Sarah Kellerman had been spending more time in her office, analyzing the crew's psychological profiles with growing concern. The shared dreams had started during the second week. impossible geometries that defied Euclid's laws, visions of colors that had no names, and the persistent sensation of being watched by something vast and patient. Alina found herself standing outside the observation deck, her hand hovering over the door controls. Inside, she knew she would find Marcus Chen, who had taken to spending his off-duty hours staring into space, as if hoping to find answers written in the stars. When she entered, she found him exactly as expected, silhouetted against the viewport like a man-shaped void. "Can't sleep?" she asked, settling into the chair beside him. Marcus didn't turn to look at her. "Sleep feels different now, like I'm not sure if I'm dreaming or remembering something that hasn't happened yet." He finally met her eyes, and Alina was struck by the exhaustion etched into his features. "Yuki's been running calculations. The signal's getting stronger, but not in a way that makes sense. It's as if the closer we get, the further away we have to travel." "Temporal distortion," Alina said, the words tasting like ash. "We've been detecting causality violations for the past 72 hours. Instruments show we're arriving at our destination before we left, or arriving at multiple locations simultaneously." "That's not how physics works," Marcus said, but his voice carried no conviction. "I know." Alina leaned back in her chair, feeling the weight of command pressing down on her shoulders. "But it's happening anyway." The observation deck fell silent except for the distant hum of the ship systems. Outside, the stars had begun to behave strangely. Some appeared to pulse with an irregular rhythm, while others seemed to shift position when they weren't being directly observed. It was as if the universe itself was becoming unstable around them. "Sarah's worried about the crew's mental state," Alina continued. "3 people have reported hearing voices in the static between radio channels. David Park claims the signal is speaking to him directly now, telling him things about the universe that he can't quite remember when he tries to write them down." Marcus nodded slowly. "I've been studying the biological samples we took from the hydroponics bay. The plants are growing in patterns that shouldn't be possible, fractal spirals that violate the laws of botany. They're healthy, but they're not following the rules of organic growth anymore." A chill ran down Alina's spine. "What kind of rules?" "The kind that says plants can't grow in 4-dimensional patterns. The kind that says a fern shouldn't be able to fold back into itself and emerge as something that's both plant and not plant." Marcus's voice had taken on a dreamy quality that Alina found deeply unsettling. "I've been thinking about what we might find when we reach the source of the signal. What if it's not a civilization at all? What if it's something much worse?" "What do you mean?" "What if the signal isn't a message from something? What if it is asterisk the something?" Marcus turned to face her fully, and Alina saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before, a knowledge that went too deep, like a man who'd stared into the abyss and found it staring back. "What if we're not going to meet an alien intelligence, but to become part of one?" Before Alina could respond, the ship's intercom crackled to life. "Commander Vasquez to the bridge immediately," came Morrison's voice, strained with an urgency that cut through their philosophical discussion. Alina and Marcus exchanged a look before hurrying to the bridge. They found Morrison standing over Park's shoulder, both men staring at readings that made no sense. The bridge lighting had dimmed to an amber glow, and Alina noticed that the air felt colder than it should. "Report," she ordered, settling into her command chair. "We've got problems," Morrison said without his usual military formality. "Multiple systems are showing failures, but when we run diagnostics, they come back as functioning perfectly. It's like the ship is simultaneously broken and not broken." "Schrodinger's spacecraft," Yuki said from her station, where she was surrounded by floating holographic equations. "We're existing in multiple states at once. The closer we get to the signal source, the more pronounced the effect becomes." Park looked up from his console, his face pale and his eyes carrying a haunted look. "Commander, the signal. It's not just mathematical anymore. It's trying to communicate. Not with words, but with concepts that don't have names. I can feel it in my mind like thoughts that aren't my own. What kind of thoughts? Elena asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know the answer. Thoughts about time being a circle, about space being a folded piece of paper, about consciousness being a disease that the universe is trying to cure. Park's voice dropped to a whisper. It knows we're coming, Commander. It's been waiting for us for longer than stars have existed. The ship shuddered suddenly, not from any impact but as if space itself was convulsing around them. The artificial gravity fluctuated, causing several crew members to grip their stations for stability. Through the main viewport, the stars began to blur and stretch, creating trails of light that shouldn't have been possible at sublight speeds. "We're approaching the event horizon of whatever this is," Yuki announced, her fingers flying over her controls. "But it's not a black hole. The mathematics are all wrong. This is something that exists outside our understanding of space-time." "Recommendations?" Elena asked, though she already knew the answer. "We should turn back," Morrison said immediately. "This is beyond our mission parameters. We're dealing with something that could destroy us all." "If we turn back now, we'll never know what we discovered," Marcus countered. "This could be the most important moment in human history." "Or the last moment," Sarah said from the entrance to the bridge. She looked as tired as the rest of them, her professional composure cracking under the strain. "I've been monitoring the crew's brainwave patterns. Everyone is showing signs of severe sleep deprivation and anxiety, but it's more than that. There are neural patterns I've never seen before, like parts of their brains are being activated that should be dormant." Elena felt the weight of decision pressing down on her shoulders. They were so close to their destination, less than 24 hours away at their current speed. But the cost was becoming apparent in the haunted eyes of her crew and the increasingly strange reports from every department. "What does the signal say about our approach?" she asked Park. His hands trembled as he adjusted his controls. "It welcomes us, Commander, but it's a welcome that feels like a funeral dirge. It says we're about to understand why humanity has always looked at the stars and felt afraid." The ship shuddered again, more violently this time. The lights flickered and dimmed, and for a moment Elena thought she saw shapes moving in the shadows, impossible geometries that hurt to look at directly. Then the moment passed, and they were back in normal space, if such a thing still existed for them. "We're committed now," Elena said finally. "Whatever we find at the end of this journey, we'll face it together. But I want everyone to be prepared for the possibility that we might not be coming home. This isn't just a scientific expedition anymore. This is something that challenges everything we thought we knew about reality." As the crew returned to their stations, Elena remained in her chair, staring at the mathematical sequences that continued to pulse on the main screen. Each number seemed to carry weight, each pattern a fragment of understanding that her mind couldn't quite grasp. The signal was no longer just a curiosity. It was becoming a part of them, worming its way into their thoughts and dreams. The Odyssey pressed onward through the increasingly strange space, following a signal that had no business existing toward a destination that defied explanation. And in the darkness between the stars, something vast and patient continued its eternal vigil, waiting for the tiny vessel that carried the hopes and fears of an entire species. Time, which had always been their ally in the vastness of space, was becoming their enemy. But Elena was beginning to suspect that time had never been what they thought it was. Like everything else they were discovering, it was merely a convenient fiction that humanity had constructed to make sense of a universe that was far more terrible and wonderful than they had ever imagined. The signal pulsed on, each beat a reminder that they were approaching the edge of human understanding, and perhaps beyond it entirely. Part 3: The Revelation. The Odyssey emerged from the strange spatial distortions like a swimmer breaking the surface of an alien ocean. Before them lay not the empty space where a dead star should have been, but something that defied every law of physics Alina had ever learned. It was a structure, but calling it that was like calling the Grand Canyon a hole in the ground. The thing before them was a geometry of impossibility, a shape that existed in dimensions beyond human perception. "My God," whispered Marcus, his voice barely audible in the stunned silence of the bridge. The structure appeared to be simultaneously a perfect sphere, a complex polyhedron, and a spiraling helix that extended into directions that their eyes couldn't quite follow. It was constructed from a material that seemed to absorb light while also radiating it, creating an aura of darkness that was somehow brighter than the stars around it. The mathematical signal pulsed from its core, each beat resonating through their bones like the heartbeat of a sleeping god. "Sensors are going crazy," Park reported, his voice tight with a mixture of terror and awe. "The structure is approximately the size of Earth's moon, but mass readings are variable. Sometimes it registers as having no mass at all, other times as having more mass than a galaxy." "That's impossible," Yuki said, but her voice carried no conviction. She was already working on her equations, trying to make sense of the impossible data streaming in. "Commander, this thing is violating conservation of mass, conservation of energy, and possibly the laws of causality themselves." Alina stared at the impossible structure, feeling her mind struggling to comprehend what she was seeing. It was beautiful in a way that was almost painful, like looking directly into the heart of creation itself. But it was also terrifying in a way that went beyond simple fear. This was the kind of terror that came from realizing that everything you thought you knew was wrong. "Is this the source of the signal?" she asked. "It's the source of everything," Park said, his eyes wide with a mixture of wonder and madness. "The signal, the spatial distortions, the temporal anomalies, they're all emanating from this thing. But Commander, I don't think it's a structure. I think it's alive." The words hung in the air like a curse. Alina felt her rational mind rebelling against the concept, but her instincts told her that Park was right. This wasn't a building or a machine. It was a being of such vast and alien nature that their minds could only perceive it as architecture. "How do you know it's alive?" Sarah asked, her professional curiosity overcoming her personal fear. "Because it's dreaming," Park said simply. "The signal isn't a message, it's the thing's dreams made manifest in mathematical form. We're not just observing it, we're inside its dream, part of its subconscious mind." The implications of that statement were too vast to contemplate. Alina felt her grip on reality beginning to slip, and she forced herself to focus on the immediate situation. "Can we communicate with it?" "I don't think communication is the right concept," Yuki said, looking up from her calculations. "This thing doesn't exist on the same plane of reality as we do. To it, we're not even insects. We're temporary fluctuations in the quantum foam, barely worth noticing. If it is aware of us at all, it's the way we're aware of individual cells in our body." "But it's been transmitting for billions of years," Marcus protested. "Why would something that doesn't care about us keep broadcasting?" "Maybe it's not broadcasting to us," Sarah suggested quietly. "Maybe we're just overhearing something meant for other beings like itself, or maybe the signal serves a purpose we can't even begin to understand." The ship shuddered again, more violently this time, and Alina noticed that the impossible structure was beginning to change. Its geometry was shifting, folding in on itself in ways that made her eyes water to look at. And in the center of the transformation, she could see something that looked almost like an eye, vast, ancient, and utterly alien. "It's waking up," Park whispered. "The signal is changing, it's becoming aware of us." The mathematical sequences on the main screen began to shift and flow, becoming more complex and beautiful with each passing moment. Alina found herself drawn to the patterns, recognizing in them a kind of truth that went beyond human understanding. The numbers spoke of infinite vastness and eternal time, of dimensions folded like paper and realities stacked like cards. "Commander, I think we should leave," Morrison said, his military training finally overcoming his scientific curiosity. Whatever this thing is, it's beyond our ability to handle. We need to report back to Earth and let them decide how to proceed. But Alina knew they couldn't leave. Not now, not when they were on the verge of the greatest discovery in human history. We need to learn what we can while we have the chance. Park, can you record everything? I'm trying, Park said, but the data keeps changing. Every time I think I have a stable recording, it shifts into something else. It's like the information doesn't want to be captured. The structure, or creature, or God, or whatever it was, continued its impossible transformation. Alina watched in fascination and horror as it began to extend tendrils of pure mathematics into the space around it, equations made manifest in the fabric of reality itself. The tendrils reached toward the Odyssey like the fingers of a sleeping giant, and she realized with dawning terror that they were about to be touched by something beyond human comprehension. "All hands brace for contact," she ordered, her voice steady despite the fear that threatened to overwhelm her. The mathematical tendrils reached the ship, and everything changed. Alina felt herself expanding, her consciousness spreading out across dimensions she hadn't known existed. She could see the entire universe spread out before her like a vast tapestry, threads of causality and possibility weaving together in patterns of infinite complexity. She could see the past and future simultaneously, could perceive the birth and death of stars as single moments in an eternal dance. And she could see the creature, truly see it now, in all its impossible glory. It was not one being but many, a collective consciousness that spanned galaxies and eons. It had been old when the universe was young, and it would be young when the universe grew old. It existed outside the normal flow of time, perceiving all moments as a single eternal now. The communication, when it came, was not in words but in pure concept. Alina felt her mind being filled with knowledge that should have driven her instantly insane, but somehow her consciousness was being protected, buffered from the full impact of the truth. She learned that humanity was not the first species to make this discovery, nor would they be the last. She learned that the universe was far older and stranger than any scientist had ever imagined, filled with beings that made humanity's greatest achievements look like the mud pies of children. But most terrifying of all, she learned that the creature was not unique. It was merely one of countless entities that existed in the spaces between reality, beings of such vast and alien nature that they could barely be said to exist at all. They were not malevolent or benevolent. They simply were, in the same way that gravity simply was, or time simply was. The contact lasted for an eternity and an instant, and when it finally ended, Alina found herself back in her body, gasping for breath and sobbing with a mixture of terror and ecstasy. Around her, the rest of the bridge crew was in similar states, their minds struggling to process what they had experienced. "Commander," Park said weakly, "the signal, it stopped." Alina looked at the main screen, where the impossible structure was beginning to fade, its geometry collapsing back into the nothingness from which it had come. But she knew it wasn't gone. It was simply returning to its natural state, existing in the spaces between human perception. "What did we learn?" Marcus asked, his voice barely a whisper. Alina tried to find words for the concepts that had been burned into her mind, but language seemed inadequate. "We learned that we're not alone," she said finally. "But we also learned that being not alone doesn't mean what we thought it meant. The universe is far larger and stranger than we ever imagined, and we're not important to it. We're not even ants in the cosmic scheme of things. We're less than ants. We're dust motes in a sunbeam." The silence that followed was deeper than any Alina had ever experienced. It was the silence of minds grappling with concepts too vast to contain, of worldviews shattering like glass. They had set out to find evidence of alien life, but what they had found was something far more terrifying and wonderful. "What do we do now?" Sarah asked, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had glimpsed the abyss and found it looking back. Alina looked out the viewport at the empty space where the impossible structure had been, knowing that it was still there, still existing in dimensions beyond their perception. "We go home," she said. "We go home and try to make sense of what we've learned, but I don't think we'll ever truly understand it. Some knowledge is too vast for human minds to hold." As the Odyssey began its journey back to Earth, Alina couldn't shake the feeling that they were changed forever. They had touched the face of something beyond human comprehension, and in doing so, they had left behind the comfortable illusions that had sustained their species for millennia. The universe was far larger and stranger than they had ever imagined, and they were very, very small within it. But somehow, in the face of that cosmic insignificance, Alina felt a strange sense of peace. They might be dust motes in a cosmic wind, but they were dust motes that had dared to reach for the stars. And in the end, perhaps that was enough. Part 4: The Descent. The return journey should have taken 3 weeks, but time had become negotiable within the Odyssey's hull. Alina noticed it first in the way the ship's chronometers would jump forward or backward without explanation, their digital displays showing times that hadn't happened yet or had already passed. The crew's sleep cycles grew increasingly erratic, with some members reporting dreams that continued into their waking hours, blurring the line between consciousness and nightmare. Dr. Sarah Kellerman's psychological evaluations revealed a disturbing pattern. Every member of the crew was showing signs of what she could only describe as temporal displacement syndrome, a condition that shouldn't exist according to any known medical science. They were experiencing memories of events that hadn't happened yet, feeling emotions that belonged to other versions of themselves, and in some cases, speaking in languages they had never learned. "Commander, we have a problem," Sarah said, her voice carrying the weight of someone who had seen too much. She stood in Alina's quarters, holding a tablet that showed brain scan patterns that looked more like abstract art than medical data. "The crew's neural activity is becoming increasingly chaotic. It's as if multiple versions of each person are trying to occupy the same brain." Alina looked at the scans, feeling a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. The brain patterns showed overlapping waves, as if each crew member was experiencing multiple timelines simultaneously. "Is this related to our encounter?" "I believe so," Sarah confirmed. "The creature we encountered exists outside normal space-time. When we made contact, we were exposed to its temporal nature. We're experiencing time the way it does, all moments at once, rather than sequentially." Implications were staggering. Alina felt her own sense of time beginning to fracture, memories of her childhood mixing with visions of her future death, moments from the mission repeating themselves in endless loops. She would be sitting in her quarters and suddenly remember conversations that hadn't happened yet, or find herself experiencing emotions that belonged to other versions of Alina Vasquez, commanders who had made different choices, who had turned back or pressed forward or simply gone mad. "How do we treat it?" she asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. "We can't," Sarah said simply. "This isn't a disease or injury, it's a fundamental change in how our consciousness interacts with time itself. We're becoming something other than human, something that exists in multiple dimensions simultaneously." The ship systems were deteriorating in ways that defied explanation. Dr. Robert Hayes, their engineer, reported that the fusion core was operating at peak efficiency while simultaneously showing signs of catastrophic failure. The life support systems were recycling air perfectly while also poisoning it with unknown compounds. The ship existed in a state of quantum superposition, both functional and broken, alive and dead. "Commander, I need to show you something," Hayes said, leading her to the engineering section. The usually pristine corridors were showing signs of impossible wear, metal that was simultaneously rusted and new, surfaces that reflected images that weren't there, shadows that moved independently of their sources. In engineering, the quantum paradoxes were even more pronounced. The fusion reactor pulsed with an eerie blue light, its containment field both holding and not holding, the plasma within both contained and free. Hayes pointed to readings that showed the reactor operating at 120% efficiency while also being completely shut down. "I've been monitoring the quantum state of our systems," he explained, his voice carrying the hollow tone of someone who had seen too many impossibilities. "We're not just experiencing temporal displacement, we're becoming quantum beings, existing in multiple states simultaneously. The ship, the crew, everything is becoming like that creature we encountered." Alina stared at the impossible readings, feeling her mind struggling to process the information. "Can we reverse it?" "I don't think reversal is a meaningful concept anymore," Hayes said. "We're not sick, we're evolving, becoming something that can perceive the universe the way that creature does. But the human mind wasn't designed for this kind of perception. We're all going insane, just at different rates." The crew's mental deterioration was accelerating. David Park had stopped speaking entirely, communicating only through complex mathematical equations that appeared on any surface he touched. His eyes had taken on a distant, unfocused quality, as if he was looking at something that existed beyond normal perception. Dr. Yuki Tanaka had become obsessed with the quantum nature of their situation, spending hours writing equations that covered every surface of her quarters. The equations described a universe with 11 dimensions, where time was a spatial dimension, and consciousness was a fundamental force like gravity or electromagnetism. "We're not just observing the universe anymore," she explained to Alina during one of her rare coherent moments. "We're participating in its creation. Every thought we have, every observation we make, collapses probability waves into reality. We're becoming gods, but gods without the wisdom to use our power." Marcus Chen had taken to wandering the ship's corridors at all hours, talking to himself in languages that didn't exist. When Alina confronted him, he claimed he was communicating with the ship itself, which had developed a kind of artificial consciousness from their quantum exposure. "The ship is dreaming, Commander," he said, his eyes bright with a feverish intensity. "It's dreaming about being human, about having a soul. But it's also dreaming about being that creature, about existing outside space and time. It's caught between two states of being just like us." Sarah Kellerman had begun documenting their deterioration with scientific precision, creating a record that would serve as both warning and testament to their transformation. Her notes described crew members who could walk through walls, who existed in multiple places simultaneously, who aged and grew younger in the same instant. "We're becoming myths," she wrote in her journal. "Legends that exist outside the normal flow of time. But myths are just stories that have lost their context, and I fear we're losing our humanity along with our temporal anchor." The ship itself seemed to be responding to their transformation. Corridors would extend into impossible distances. Rooms would exist in multiple locations simultaneously, and the very fabric of the vessel's structure began to take on the same impossible geometry as the creature they had encountered. Alina found herself at the center of this maelstrom of transformation, her command authority both absolute and meaningless. She was simultaneously leading her crew home and abandoning them to their fate, making decisions that would save them all and destroy them completely. The quantum nature of their existence meant that every choice she made was both right and wrong, every order both obeyed and ignored. "Commander," Morrison said during one of his increasingly rare lucid moments, "we need to consider the possibility that we're not going to make it back to Earth. Not as humans, anyway. Whatever we're becoming, it may not be compatible with normal space-time." Alina looked at her military liaison, seeing in his weathered face the same transformation that was affecting them all. His eyes held depths that hadn't been there before, as if he was looking at multiple realities simultaneously. "What do you suggest we do?" she asked. "We record everything," Morrison said. "Leave a message for whoever finds us, or whoever we become. We document our transformation so that others might learn from it. It was a soldier's solution, facing the inevitable with dignity and purpose. Alina found herself agreeing, even as part of her mind screamed that there had to be another way, that they could still make it home, that they could still be human. But the transformation was accelerating now, each hour bringing new impossibilities. The crew was beginning to experience each other's memories, to feel each other's emotions, to exist as a kind of collective consciousness that was both unified and fractured. They were becoming something that had no name in any human language, something that existed in the spaces between reality and dream. Alina sat in her quarters, watching the walls shift and flow like liquid geometry, and tried to remember what it had felt like to be human. The memories came in fragments: a childhood birthday party, her first day at the academy, the moment she had been given command of the Odyssey. But they were mixed with other memories, other lives, other versions of Alina Vasquez who had made different choices and lived different fates. She was becoming everything she could have been, everything she might yet be, everything she would never become. The quantum nature of her existence was collapsing all possibilities into a single, impossible reality, and she was both terrified and exhilarated by the transformation. The signal that had drawn them here continued to pulse in the background, no longer a mathematical sequence but a kind of cosmic heartbeat. It had been their doom and their salvation, their destruction and their transcendence. It had shown them the truth about the universe and their place within it, and in doing so, it had taken away everything they thought they knew about themselves. But in the end, Alina realized, perhaps that was the point. Perhaps humanity had always been meant to evolve beyond its limitations, to transcend the narrow boundaries of normal space-time and become something greater. Perhaps the creature they had encountered wasn't a monster but a teacher, showing them the path to a higher form of existence. As the Odyssey continued its journey through the transformed space, its crew no longer entirely human but not yet whatever they were becoming, Alina made her peace with the transformation. They had sought knowledge among the stars, and they had found it. The price was their humanity, but the reward was a kind of cosmic awareness that few beings in the universe ever achieved. The signal pulsed on, carrying its impossible message across the void, and the crew of the Odyssey continued their journey home, forever changed by their encounter with the infinite. Part 5: The Echo. The Odyssey returned to Earth space on a Tuesday that was also a Friday, in a year that was simultaneously 2157 and 1843 and 3021. The ship's quantum state had become so unstable that it existed in multiple times simultaneously, its crew both human and post-human, both dead and alive, both home and still traveling through the void. Alina stood on the bridge watching Earth rotate below them, but she saw it as it had been, as it was, and as it would be. She saw the dinosaurs roaming its surface, saw the rise and fall of civilizations, saw the sun expanding to swallow the inner planets. Time had become a landscape for her, a place she could walk through at will, but she could no longer experience it the way humans did, as a linear progression from past to future. "We're receiving transmissions from Earth," Park reported, though his voice came from a mouth that existed in 17 dimensions simultaneously. "They want to know where we've been. They want to know what we found." Alina considered the question, knowing that any answer she gave would be both true and false. They had been gone for 3 months, but also for 3,000 years. They had found nothing, but they had also found everything. They had discovered that humanity was alone in the universe, but also that the universe was teeming with life beyond human comprehension. "Tell them we found knowledge," she said finally. "Tell them we found truth. Tell them we found that the universe is far larger and stranger than they can imagine." But she knew that the message would be garbled in transmission, would arrive as static and nonsense, would be interpreted as the ravings of a crew driven mad by deep space isolation. The truth they had discovered was too large to fit into human concepts, too vast to be contained in language or mathematics. The crew had become something else during their journey, something that existed partially outside normal space-time. They could see the past and future simultaneously, could perceive dimensions beyond human comprehension, could understand truths that would drive normal minds insane. But they had also lost something: the ability to exist fully in the present moment, to experience life as a linear progression, to be simply human. "Commander," Morrison said, his voice coming from a throat that existed in multiple realities, "what do we do now?" It was the question that had been haunting them all since their transformation. They had returned to Earth, but they could never truly come home. They were no longer human enough to live among humans, but not alien enough to exist fully in the cosmic realm they had glimpsed. They were caught between two states of being, trapped in a kind of existential limbo. "We wait," Alina said, knowing that waiting was both the only thing they could do and the most impossible task of all. "We wait for them to understand. We wait for humanity to evolve to the point where they can comprehend what we've become. We wait for the universe to reveal its next mystery." But waiting meant something different for them now. They could wait for 1,000 years and experience it as a single moment, or wait for a second and live through infinite variations of possibility. Time had become their prison and their liberation, their curse and their gift. Sarah Kellerman had been documenting their transformation with scientific precision, creating a record that would serve as both warning and invitation to future generations. Her notes described beings who had transcended human limitations, but had also lost the comforting illusions that made human life bearable. "We've become what we sought," she wrote in her final journal entry. "We wanted to find alien life, to discover that we were not alone in the universe. But what we found was far more profound. We discovered that consciousness itself is the alien force, that mind is the true mystery of the cosmos. We have become the aliens we sought, and in doing so, we have found that the greatest frontier is not outer space but inner space, the vast realms of consciousness that we barely begin to explore." The Odyssey orbited Earth in a quantum superposition, both present and absent, both real and unreal. Its crew existed in a similar state, neither fully human nor fully transcendent, trapped between the world they had left and the world they had discovered. Alina watched the planet below, seeing its entire history from formation to destruction, and felt a strange mixture of love and detachment. She had been human once, had loved and feared and hoped like any other person. But that humanity felt like a distant memory now, a dream she had woken from into a larger reality. "The signal is still transmitting," Park reported. "But now I understand what it's saying. It's not a message from something else. It's the sound of consciousness itself, the heartbeat of a universe that is aware of its own existence." The crew had become part of that cosmic consciousness, had merged with the infinite mind that lay behind the veil of normal perception. They had discovered that the universe was not a collection of dead matter following mechanical laws, but a living system of unimaginable complexity and beauty. But the price of that discovery was their humanity, their ability to exist in the simple, linear world of human experience. They had gained the universe but lost their souls, had transcended death but also transcended life. "In the end," Alina said to her transformed crew, "we have become what we always were, stardust contemplating itself, the universe experiencing itself through the limited perspective of what used to be human minds. We are the universe's way of knowing itself, and in that knowledge we have become both more and less than human." The Odyssey continued its eternal orbit, its crew existing in a state of quantum grace, waiting for humanity to evolve to the point where they could join them in their cosmic consciousness. The signal continued its endless transmission, the mathematical heartbeat of a universe that was far stranger and more wonderful than anyone had ever imagined. And in the darkness between the stars, other signals began to appear, other consciousness reaching out across the void, creating a network of minds that spanned the cosmos. The universe was awakening, and humanity had been given a glimpse of its ultimate destiny. But for now, the crew of the Odyssey waited, existing in their quantum superposition, both home and far away, both human and post-human, both alive and dead. They had sought knowledge among the stars and had found it, but the knowledge had transformed them into something that could never fully return to the simple world they had left behind. The echo of their discovery would reverberate through time, a signal that would draw other explorers to make the same journey, to undergo the same transformation, to join the cosmic consciousness that awaited all who dared to seek knowledge beyond the boundaries of human understanding. And in that echo, in that endless transmission of mathematical truth, lay both humanity's greatest achievement and its ultimate destiny: to become part of something larger than themselves, to merge with the infinite mind that lay behind the veil of stars, to find their place in the cosmic dance that had been going on since before time began. The signal pulsed on, carrying its message of transformation across the void, and the universe listened with infinite patience, waiting for more minds to awaken to the truth that lay beyond the boundaries of human comprehension. In the end, the Odyssey's journey was not about finding alien life or discovering new worlds. It was about discovering the alien within themselves, the cosmic consciousness that lay dormant in every human mind, waiting for the right signal to awaken it to its true nature. They had sought the stars and had found themselves transformed, had sought knowledge and had found wisdom, had sought the future and had found eternity. The echo beyond the stars was the echo of their own consciousness, magnified and transformed by contact with the infinite. And in that echo, they had found their place in the cosmic scheme, not as rulers or explorers, but as participants in the great dance of consciousness that made the universe aware of its own existence. The signal continued its endless transmission, a lullaby for the universe itself, and the crew of the Odyssey slept the sleep of the transformed, dreaming of dimensions beyond human comprehension, of a reality that was both stranger and more wonderful than they had ever imagined. And in their dreams they were home,